Welcome to the world of sci-fi stories, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the channel. Enjoy the listening. They believed humanity was defeated until the Vengeance fleet struck back. The first encounter, the darkness of space, stretched endlessly, broken only by the distant glow of stars in this vast emptiness. An alien fleet moved silently toward the blue planet. Commander V stood on the bridge of the flagship Dominion, his reptilian eyes fixed on the holographic display before him. His fleet was the strongest in the Zork's empire, a force that had conquered dozens of worlds. Earth was just another primitive rocket their way. Pathetic, VX muttered, his sharp claws tapping against the metal railing. His second-in-command, Officer Kill, nodded in agreement. Scans showed no planetary defenses, no active space fleet. Their technology is outdated. This will be over quickly. Commander VX allowed himself a cruel smile. He had heard about humans, weak creatures, divided among themselves, struggling to even leave their own planet. The Zorks would wipe them out before they could react. Begin transmission. For I ordered. A deep hum filled the command deck as a message was sent to Earth in every known galactic language. The ultimatum was simple: surrender now, and some of you may be spared. Resist, and your world will burn. Seconds passed, then minutes, but there was no response. VX frowned. Strange. Most species beg for mercy at this point. Kel checked the readings again. They received the message, Commander, but they are completely silent. A chill spread through the bridge. There was something unsettling about this. Most planets panicked, governments collapsed, leaders pleaded, but Earth did nothing. They are either foolish or hiding something. VX growled. Very well, deploy the first wave. Show the why. The Zork's empire is feared. Across the stars, 4 massive warships broke from the formation, descending toward the planet's surface. Their mission was simple: disable Earth's power grids, eliminate any resistance, and prepare the world for full occupation. As they entered the atmosphere, something unexpected happened. Commander, a technician shouted, we're picking up an unidentified signal. VX turned sharply. From the technician's hand shook as he analyzed the data. It's coming from the dark side of the moon. Ren narrowed his eyes. The moon, that lifeless rock. He opened a channel to the lead warship. Do you see anything unusual? The response was immediate but filled with static. Sir, something is here. We detect. No, it can't be. The transmission cut off. Then in the next moment, the warship's marker on the holographic display blinked once, then vanished. A sudden silence filled the bridge backs. Grip tightened. What just happened? He barked. No one had an answer. The warship was simply gone. No explosion, no distress signal, just erased from existence. The remaining 3 warships tried to retreat, but something was hunting them. One by one their signals flickered, then disappeared. Commander VX felt the first real pang of fear in his long military career. This was no primitive world. Something was waiting for them. Then a new transmission came through, but this time it wasn't from the Zork's fleet. A human voice, calm and cold, echoed through the ship. To the invaders, you shouldn't have come here. Vax's blood ran cold. For the first time he realized they had made a mistake, a terrible mistake. The hidden might of humanity. A cold silence settled over the Dominion's bridge. Every officer, every technician, every soldier on board felt the weight of the moment. 4 of the Zork's empire's most powerful warships had vanished without a trace, without a fight. Commander V clenched his jaw. His reptilian scales, usually a dull shade of green, darkened. His tension spread through his body. This is impossible. Find out what happened, he barked. Technicians scrambled over their consoles, analyzing every piece of data, but there was nothing. No wreckage, no debris, no distress calls. It was as if the ships had been swallowed by the void itself. And then the lights flickered. A low hum echoed through the ship. Screens glitched. Holographic displays flashed erratically. Static buzzed through the con. Someone was interfering with their systems. A deep, distorted voice came through the speakers. Your move. Commander's blood ran cold. Who is this? He demanded. No response. The screen cleared, replaced by an image. No live feed. The bridge crew leaned forward, their fear rising. It was the moon, But it was not lifeless massive structures previously hidden by advanced cloaking fields. Shimmered into view dark angular warships emerged from vast hangars, engines burning with an eerie blue glow. Their designs were nothing like the primitive satellites the Zorks had seen. In human records they were sleek, heavily armored, built for war. Vax's mind raced. How did they build this without the galaxy knowing? Keln, his second in command, swallowed hard. Sir, they knew we were coming before VX could respond. The unknown ships moved faster than anything in the Zork's fleet. One moment they were near the moon, the next they were among the invaders. Blinding energy pulses erupted across the darkness of space. The first Zork's cruiser took a direct hit, its shields shattering like glass. The second was sliced clean in half before it could even react. What are these weapons? An officer screamed. V's claws dug into the armrests of his command chair. The Zork's fleet outnumbered the humans, outgunned them, and yet they were being hunted. On the main display, a human warship locked onto a Zork's dreadnought. It was much smaller, barely a third of the size, but it didn't hesitate. It vanished, a burst of energy surrounding its hull, then reappeared behind the dreadnought in an instant, faster than light jumps in combat. Before the Zorik crew could react, the human ship fired a single round, just one, and the Drayden imploded from within. The bridge of the Dominion fell into chaos. Officers shouted conflicting reports. Some demanded retreat, others called for an all-out attack, but VX just sat there watching. Commander Kell yelled, snapping him out of his daze. V's fists tightened. He had seen battles lost before, but not like this, never like this. Order the fleet to regroup, he commanded, forcing his voice to remain steady. We fight, we adapt, we crush them. But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. This was not a battle, this was a slaughter, and the humans were just getting started. The trapped titans, the battlefield was chaos. Human warships darted between the towering Zork's dreadnoughts like ghosts, striking and vanishing before the reptilian invaders could react. Every shot from Earth's fleet was precise, lethal, designed not to wound, but to eliminate. On the bridge of the Dominion, Commander V's confidence had crumbled into pure disbelief. This is not possible, he muttered, his sharp claws gripping the command console. His fleet, the pride of the Zorik Empire, was being annihilated. Screens flickered, alarms blared, officers screamed for orders, but nothing made sense. The humans, those fragile creatures, were fighting like they have prepared for this moment their entire existence. Sir, Officer Keln gasped, his scaled face pale with fear. We're receiving another transmission from the humans. VX hesitated, then nodded. On screen the image shifted. A human stood before them, a woman wearing a dark military uniform, her expression calm, unreadable. Behind her, a massive holographic display showed the burning remains of First Fleet. Commander VX, she said, her voice smooth, but carrying an undeniable edge of authority. I'm Admiral Elaine Carter of Earth's Defense Fleet. She paused, letting the silence stretch. You have one chance. VX clenched his jaw. One chance for what? Her eyes darkened to run. Laughter erupted across the bridge, not from confidence, but from desperation. You expect me to believe? V started, but Carter cut him off. Believe what you want, she said, cold. But we know how your kind thinks. You thought you were attacking a weak world, a species too divided to fight back. She took a step forward, the camera zooming in slightly. We've been watching the stars for a long time, Commander. We knew someone like you would come eventually, so we prepared. The words hid FRX like a physical blow. Humans had known, they had waited, they had set a trap. Your fleet is already doomed, Carter continued. Your engines disabled, your escape routes cut off, your reinforcements. She smirked. They're never coming. Vax's eyes widened. His claws raced over the controls, checking the fleet's status. The Admiral wasn't bluffing. Somehow, someway, Earth had crippled the Zork's fleet without them even realizing it. Their hyperdrives were offline, their ships were locked in a kill zone, a slaughterhouse. Kell stumbled backward, horror in his voice stir Where trapped, the bridge fell silent. Even the alarms seemed quieter. VX exhaled, his reptilian mind struggling to process the impossible. The mighty Zork's empire had walked blindly into a human ambush, and now they would pay the price. Carter's voice cut through the silence. Decide quickly, Commander. The transmission ended, and then Earth's fleet charged humanity. Unleash the stars burned with fire and death. Earth's fleet moved with surgical precision, cutting through the Zorks. Warships like they were nothing more than target practice, their weapons fast, efficient, devastating, struck without hesitation. Every shot counted, every maneuver had purpose on the Dominion's bridge. Commander V watched in growing horror. The humans weren't just fighting. They were hunting. Sir, our defenses are collapsing. Kell's voice trembled. We need to retreat. VX didn't respond. He couldn't. His mind was frozen, struggling to process the impossible truth. The Zorks were outmatched, not just in firepower, but in strategy. For centuries, the Zorks' empire had believed themselves superior. They had conquered over 50 species, reduced countless civilizations to ash. But humanity had done something no species had ever dared. They had waited, planned, prepared, and now, like a predator that had lured its prey into a cage, they were striking with precision. The silent killers outside a human Drain glided through the wreckage, its black surface barely reflecting the light of distant stars. It carried no heavy cannons, no visible weapons, and yet, with each passing moment, Zorak warships vanished from existence. What is that? An officer screamed, pointing to the screen. That ship isn't firing. And then it happened. The dread shimmered, flickering like a mirage. Suddenly, dozens of smaller, needle-like crafts erupted from its hull, silent, black, moving faster than the eye could follow. They wove through the chaos, slipping between laser fire, avoiding detection. And as they neared their targets, they latched on one by one. Zorak ships went dark, their lights flickered, their engines failed, their weapons refused to fire. And then they exploded. No external fire, no visible attack, just a silent instant kill. Vax's blood ran cold. Some kind of infiltration drones. But how could humans disable an entire ship without boarding it? And then he understood. They weren't just disabling the ships, they were hacking them. The final stand. Brax's claws dug into his command console. He had only one option left: fight until the last ship burns. All remaining forces regroup, he roared. We will not surrender. But even as he said it, his warriors hesitated, because surrender was no longer an option. Not when the humans controlled the battlefield, not when their own ships were turning against them. Before VX could give his next command, the Dominion's main screen flickered. A human face appeared again. Admiral Carter. She stared at him, calm, unshaken, completely in control. Commander VX, she said, this is your last chance. VX bared his fangs. We will never kneel. Carter tilted her head. Who said anything about kneeling? And then the human fleet fired one final time. The Empire's fall. The stars themselves seemed to tremble. Human warships closed in like wolves circling a dying beast. The once mighty Zork's fleet was nothing more than a graveyard of burning wrecks. Every remaining vessel was either disabled, surrendering, or desperately trying to escape. On the bridge of the Dominion, Commander R stood, frozen, his claws twitching against the console he had spent decades conquering. Lesser species watching them beg, watching them burn. But this was something he had never witnessed before. Not a battle, not a war, a massacre. And humanity, they weren't even breaking the sweat. The ghost fleet, Sir, hyperdrives are still offline. Kell shouted, his voice shaking. We're trapped, V snarled, but deep down, he already knew humans had disabled their engines before the battle even began. Had they hacked them, remotely planted sabers? No, that wasn't it. They had simply been prepared. Sir, we have another problem. Kell's voice died in his throat. As the main view screen flickered, something was coming, a shadow moving through the debris field. No heat signature, no radar ping, just darkness shifting through space, a shape that seemed almost unreal. And then it decloaked, a massive human battleship, black as the void, covered in smooth, seamless armor. No visible thrusters, no external weapons. Yet VX Knew this was the executioner. The bridge fell. Silent officers stared in horror as more ships appeared out of nowhere, decloaking one by one, surrounding the shattered Zoric fleet. These weren't just warships, they were predators, the real human fleet. The first wave of the battle had been a distraction. The real force had been waiting, silent, invisible, until now. This isn't war, one of the officers whispered. This is extermination. VX felt something cold crawl down his spine. For the first time in his life, he understood fear. The final message. The screen flickered again. Admiral Carter stared back at him, calm, ruthless. Inevitable, Commander VX, she said, her voice as steady as ever. The battle is over. VX clenched his jaw. You expect me to surrender? Carter exhaled. No, Commander. She tilted her head slightly. I expect you to die. V's eyes widened. You wouldn't dare. The transmission cut off, and then the human fleet opened fire. Thousands of railgun rounds, plasma lances, and kinetic slugs rained down in unison. It wasn't a chaotic battle anymore. It was a sentence being carried out one by one. The last Zork's warships vanished in bursts of fire and metal. The Dominion trembled under the impact. Consoles exploded. Crew members screamed. The mighty flagship of the Zork's empire, once feared across the galaxy, was being torn apart like paper. VX roared in defiance, gripping the console as flames erupted around him. His vision blurred, his lungs filled with smoke. This was impossible. This was wrong. How could a lesser species defeat the greatest empire in the galaxy? His last thought before the fire consumed him was simple. We should have never come to Earth. And then the Dominion exploded. The Empire's reckoning. The great Zoric flagship Dominion was gone, vaporized in a storm of human firepower. The battlefield was silent now, but the war was far from over. Deep within the heart of the Zork's empire, on their capital world Zorvanik, the supreme overlord stood frozen before a holographic display. His golden eyes stared in shock at the final transmission from Commander VX. Humanity had destroyed the invasion fleet, not just defeated, erased. This was not how it was supposed to go. Humans were primitives, untested in galactic warfare. They should have been overwhelmed, crushed under the might of the Empire. And yet the Zorks had lost everything. The final warning, the deep, piercing alarm, echoed through the Overlord's grand war chamber. His advisors and generals rushed around, their voices filled with panic. Supreme One, human warships have entered our sector. The Overlord's jaw clenched. How many? The general hesitated. Not many. But these are not ordinary ships. The holographic map shifted, displaying ghost-like vessels moving at impossible speeds, warping in and out of the system. They didn't travel in straight lines. They didn't follow patterns. They moved like hunters stalking their prey. And then the transmission came. The massive screen in the war chamber flickered, revealing the calm, expressionless face of Admiral Carter. She wasted no time. Overlord of the Zork's empire, she said, her voice steady. You have one chance. The Overlord bared his fangs. You think I will surrender to a primitive species? Carter's expression didn't change. No, she said, simply, I think you will burn. Then the message cut off. The Overlord's blood turned cold because he knew this wasn't a threat. It was a promise. The fall begins. Moments later, the first explosions rocked the capital city. Human stealth bombers had already infiltrated the atmosphere. No warning, no mercy. Zorvanik's sky turned into a firestorm as human missiles rained down, striking key infrastructure, military bases, and energy hubs. The Overlord rushed to the palace balcony. What he saw made his blood freeze. The mighty Zoric defense fleet stationed around the capital world was falling apart. Their own ships were turning against them. Engines failing, weapons malfunctioning, shields shutting down. Human cyber warfare had taken control. And then the human fleet arrived, not in thousands, not in overwhelming numbers, but in a precise, calculated force that struck with surgical efficiency. This wasn't conquest. This was punishment. Humanity had been attacked, their home threatened. Now they were answered with fire, with wrath. With no survivors, a species to fear, the Supreme Overlord watched in helpless terror as his empire, one that had stood unchallenged for centuries, crumbled in a matter of hours. His people had always believed humans were weak, that they were nothing more than another species to conquer, but humanity had proven them wrong. They weren't just another race in the galaxy, they were something else, something far worse. And as the sky burned and his empire collapsed, the Overlord finally understood the one terrible truth. Humanity was never meant to be ruled. They were meant to be feared. The final judgment. The once mighty Zorg Empire was no more. Its fleets shattered its cities, burning its leaders, hunted the great capital of Zorvanik, once a beacon of power, now lay in ruins. Human warships hovered in orbit, their cannons silent, their mission complete. The world below smoldered, its proud defenses reduced to ash and wreckage, and in the heart of the fallen palace, the supreme Overlord knelt in chains, the price of arrogance. Admiral Carter stood before him, her expression cold and unreadable. Around her, heavily armed human soldiers kept their weapons trained on the last remnants of the Zork's leadership. The Overlord's once golden robes were torn, his face bruised. "You should have killed me," he spat, his voice laced with bitterness. Carter tilted her head. "You misunderstand, Overlord." She stepped forward, lowering herself to his level, her piercing gaze locking onto his. Death would be mercy. The Overlord's jaw clenched. "Then what will you do?" Carter smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We will let the galaxy decide your fate." The broadcast that changed everything. Across the stars, every empire, every faction, every species washed in horror. A live transmission sent across all known networks displayed the mighty Zorik Overlord, broken, humiliated, and kneeling before a human officer. The message was simple: let this be a lesson. Humanity does not start wars, but we will end them. The reaction was instant. Some species cheered, seeing their old oppressors finally fall. Others trembled, realizing the terrifying truth. Humanity was not to be challenged. For the first time in history, the balance of power had shifted, not towards conquest, not towards domination, but towards fear. The new order, the Overlord was taken away, his fate sealed, and as the last human ships left Zorvanik behind, the message echoed across the galaxy: the age of the Zorks was over, and in its place a new power had risen, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as the one species the galaxy would never dare to provoke again: humanity. And they had just begun.